Hello, everyone. We are here. It is the week of the North American Championship Continentals. I am getting ready myself to prepare. I'm doing a lot of work internally, externally, however internally you want to look at it. I'm trying to get whatever edge I can after giving the world a deck to target in some way. Not to say that it's unbeatable or too good or the best deck even. It's a very good deck, and it's a strategy that I kind of built and culminated came to fruition through a lot of different testings and things like that. But today, what I'm going to focus on, this is going to be almost entirely mulligans. It is the biggest contention point of how to mulligan with the Dwarven Mine Diggy Diggy Hole deck. And for reference point, let's bring that up here on our way to North American Continentals. This is the event the deck list I played. I haven't made too many updates. I have been missing in action, kind of doing some family stuff. It's the holidays. It's not the greatest time to have a large tournament to prepare for, but I do value my time with my family and friends. I was out of town visiting. It was nice to take some time and, of course, play some Lorcana on the side, get some feels for it. But I do believe that most of the work I'm going to be able to do is going to be very last minute up until the basically day of, including what I see at the LCQs. They will have somewhat of an influence on how the day goes, what people think is there, because once we're at the LCQs, I mean, we can watch essentially what a fourth of the field is playing. And also is a disadvantage for those in the LCQs going into the main event. Not only is the fact that it's closed deck that's going to affect people who's more well known than others for their deck choices, such as myself, but also those the LCQs. Are they really going to audible from a deck that they just won a chance in the event itself with to a different deck? Some of that may be based off of the fact that we're playing 2-game format versus best of 3, which is a vastly different format. I do know that watching some of the previous events this weekend and the past weekend, there were some Star City events, a 1K, a 2K, and a 1K, I think, over the weekend. And I think if you look at some of the records that some people posted throughout the weekend, a lot of 2-1s or 1-2s are how the games are gone, and really need to have a deck that can 2-0 consistently, or at least consistently enough to where you can make the cut. I've done a lot of math regarding how the breakdown of the tournament's going to go. It does depend on the first 3 to 4 rounds significantly, what records will make it. It can be, depending on if there are enough 2-0s or 2-0s 3 times in a row, the people who are at that point can potentially draw. We saw in Europe that was not the case, and no one was essentially 3-0, 6-0 after the first 3 rounds. The best was 5-1 in far as games go, so it would be 2-0-1 is your record. So it is difficult. It's no easy feat to 2-0 a lot, and I've, myself included at the Charles Collectible event, I played a total of 12 rounds, and I think I had 5 2-0s, maybe 5 2-0s, I think, in total throughout the day. And that's difficult. And depending on how I timed it, it would have been a very good day or a very bad day, depending on how the matchups broke and what happened. So it's not going to be easy. Those who do well in best of 2, I think, are those who do get a little bit lucky in some ways. You do have to get lucky to win it in general, but also just the fact that there's so little room for variance to go against you, meaning every game matters so much that you really need to high roll the entire day, is hard. And it's going to be hard for people to play, and it's going to be hard for people to kind of get adjusted to if this is going to be the new norm, which we'll find out hopefully soon after Continentals, maybe when Worlds is. I would imagine they're announcing it at Continentals, I hope. That would be great to know, just for planning sake for those who are going. I know that people are planning coming from overseas, if it's going to be in Disney World in Florida, which is convenient for me, but and if I end up getting to go anyway, I might just go just to have fun and hang out if I can. But I know people traveling from overseas really need to know the dates sooner rather than later, so here's hoping. But this is a deck, I think, that does have the ability to 2-0 pretty consistently. It is a very aggressive deck. It can be punishing. It definitely has the ability to close games with very good tech cards like Kita and Pete to really ice the game. Rapunzel is a very punishing card that makes it so that your opponent really can make mistakes and really not get out of it in any kind of way. They're just kind of stuck at some point. If they can't quest and they can't challenge very efficiently, then what are they going to do against a Rapunzel when you can challenge into their things? So I've taken this deck, and again, we're going to go through mulligans here. I've yapped enough about the event itself. I'm going to go through essentially what I think are going to be the 6 most played decks, and we're going to do different variations on the play and on the draw. So let's jump into the first one here. Let me just get a little graphic up here. I'm ill prepared. I had this going here. I guess we can just do it manually. Okay, so this is the first hand here. Let's look at this. Not a bad hand. It has some good cards, no singers. So let's analyze this. I have the 6 color pairs. I'm going to essentially hide them to see which one I'm talking about. The biggest outlier is going to be Ruby Sapphire. It's the deck that you really have to change how you're going about mulliganing, and one that changes the most with what you can keep or not. So let's hide all these here and go blind. What are we doing with this hand blind? Let's just say we start the game on the play, and in best of 2, we have the first game on the play. I'm not the biggest fan of keeping Storms without copies of Cinderella going first. So I don't want to keep either of these. I do find Calhoun to be significantly better when going second as a card to play on turn 2 versus Smee, and often I want to not have to play the card over a Smee with how the uninkable situation might work out. And I do want to keep a 1-drop. It is crucially important to have a 1-drop with this deck. I do think that in most of the cases, which we'll go through here, you'll see me want to hard mulligan for a 1-drop with the exclusion of Smee. I think Smee is the only card I will keep if I don't have a 1-drop blind, or even any matchup. Smee is probably the best card or second best card in the deck. The best card is probably Cinderella. It's just one of the cards that's impossible to really replace as far as the effect it does. It's a huge ink swing. It's the best card going first and second to both punish and keep a lead going. Also threaten your opponent when you may not even have a storm. They might have to respect it. But yes, it is pretty important here. So I'm going to just go through here. This is my blind mulligan, and we'll see that this probably stands true. Since there's no Cinderella, I would probably, on going first, do the same into these few decks here. Basically, any matchup that we have here, even Ruby Amethyst, I think the only matchup where this wouldn't be the best hand, and I might want to reconsider a little bit going first, is Amber Steel. Amber Steel is a deck, and you'll see, I think we'll notice with these mulligans, a lot of the hands when going first are going to be very similar across the board, with the exception of Ruby Sapphire. Blind and going first are very similar in the fact that you're just trying to be the most proactive thing and make them answer your threats. So it's much less about what you have to do and more so what they have to do to respond. And this hand has, again, 2 very good questers. We have a card we can ink if we need to, a Daisy on turn 1 on the play, which is great. When going second, Daisy is much less high priority. I still may keep it in some matchups going second. I will always keep it if I am missing another 1-drop, but say we'll get to that going a second here. But I think in every matchup here, this is my mulligan as well. Amber Steel might be the exception. It is not great to have to play Daisy out when you want to find a Cinderella. And I have a Happy here that can be my 1-drop. I think going first even, I may not want the Daisy in that matchup. It's really good at bumping things and then being Rapunzeled. But without a Rapunzel, without a dock, I kind of want to dig a little bit more against essentially this configuration here. Going through. So essentially, if I'm going first and I know I'm playing against this matchup, I'm including the Daisy in the mulligan versus every other matchup pretty much. Daisy is much better at fighting a lot of different boards there, being a kind of a brick wall for people to try and quest into, but the Amber Steel mirror match, Daisy doesn't really have a place in the beginning there. So this is kind of what I would do. Going second, blind. I did mention that Calhoun is better going second. However, in the unknown, I don't think that it's better going second than Smee. I think Smee and Calhoun, they're always going to be fine going second. I'm not saying that Calhoun is better than Smee going second. I still think Smee is probably better when going second than Calhoun, especially blind. But I'm saying that Calhoun is a card that gets better. There's a consideration to removing one of the copy of these from the deck, going down to 3. I think that's what I'll end up doing for the event. Playing only 3 Calhouns is totally fine. I don't think it's a 4 of. I think I was experimenting with the 4 of, and I wanted to see how it was when I drew it often enough, as I much talked about in this video. When trying out new decks, you want to make sure you draw the cards that are important. And but yeah, I think going second, the mulligan remains pretty much the same. Daisy is worse in most cases. The main issue with not keeping the Daisy blind is in this situation where you are playing here. So I don't really enjoy keeping Daisy second, but blind, I think with a curve like this, I would, in the off chance that I'm playing against blue-red. And in the case where I'm playing against basically everything else besides blue-red, what I'm looking to do with this Daisy is just never actually quest with it. I'm looking to have it in play and either challenge against green purple or curse mark folks or anything like that. Ruby Amethyst just kind of keep in check Churnbog's followers and make it so that they can't quest with anything that has 3 strength or something like that. So I can then again use this as a Rapunzel card more so than actually a quester. But I think keeping it going second is a little bit risky in all these matchups. Especially once the box of I have a 1-drop is checked. That's again almost the entire start of every hand is going to be first thing to look for. Any card that costs 1. Do I have that or not? How much do I have to mulligan for it? That's step 1 of every mulligan decision. Do I have a 1-drop? Step 2 is what does my curve look like? How many uninkables I have? What am I playing against? What am I playing on the player draw? Everything else is actually after the fact of do I have a 1-drop or not? Because if you miss your 1-cost cards, then you're gonna have a bad time. But I think that going second, every other matchup, this becomes a control card blind. And I'm only showing the matchups here, not because this is what I would keep in these specific matchups, but blind, I have to consider these matchups. And in this matchup here, I do kind of want to have Daisy on turn 1. And I also don't mind having Happy. The only real deck that punishes you for keeping the Daisy going second, besides potentially Amber Steel, which it can be up in the air if it's punishing or not, because Daisy's fine to play. It's good into Cinderella, it's good into another Daisy, because it then just is a lightning rod for things. Happy is a card I do want to keep sometimes against Diablos. You wanted to make sure you have something to challenge into it if you can help it. You make it so that they have to have Diablo, Shiftline, and Storm, and another action to play, so that's 4 cards they need to make your Happy bad against the Diablo. So it's not always the case that they have that entire chain. Of course, they can also have hidden code besides the Storm, but at least it's something at that point, right? You can have some way to check the Happy, or check the Diablo with Happy. So this hand is pretty strong. I do like these kind of hands. It's very rare that I keep Storms or Strengths, just to preface that from the beginning here. I don't really mind having them when I have a Cinderella, but only when I'm not mulliganing a ton. Because there are some situations where if you keep a Storm and happen to draw a second one with a Cinderella, your Cinderella gets killed early, or it's a matchup where they have no targets like Blue-Red, or if they're just playing around it in some ways like Ruby Amethyst can, Storm can be a liability and kind of clunk up your hand. So let's just say we captured this hand. We are lucky enough to be going first in the first game, and we're against each of the few kind of decisions there. So the first one up would be, let's go on my list here. It's going to be not in order, is it? Okay, that's fine. So we mulliganed. So we have the Cinderella now, where we didn't before. We have the option to play 3 1-drops. I don't often like playing 3 1-drops. I don't mind just playing a 1-drop 1, inking the second 1-drop to play a Smee. Going first, I'd probably want to, with this hand, lead on the Daisy. Blind, of course. Knowing this matchup, however, I may, since we're forced into the Daisy Duck line, be inclined to play the Cinderella. The only risk there is if your strength is going to be good or not. You can pretty much bank on the fact that Lilo is not very good against green purple. That might be my first ink, play the Cinderella, and then on turn 2, I can then assess what I'm going to do with the rest of my hand. I might, play a Smee after inking a Happy, and then play the strength on pretty much anything, except for the 0-1 Diablo. It is pretty vulnerable to Ursula if I don't do that, but there is some risks with this. You can instead just ink it and play the Smee and leave the Cinderella there to do something else with, play anything off the top. So there's some ways to play that hand out against an Ursula where it's not too devastating. Green Steel is similar. I think I'd be much more inclined, if I was playing against Green Steel, to do exactly what I said when going first, Cinderella, and then followed up with play strength on the 1-cost Diablo, the 1-2 that ends up shift lining. You can't really wait too much for the 3-cost Diablo. You can get under it, and being able to go Cindy into Smee, kill your thing, and then turn 3 Smee Daisy is enough pressure where even if they play a turn 3 Diablo, it's not going to be good enough, so you can kill their 1-cost and just make it so they can't storm you. The one scary thing with that situation would then be you don't have a strength for their turn 3 Ursula potentially, but you can't beat everything. Plus you get some draw steps before then, so any Doc and Rapunzel is going to be great off the top from there. But overall, strong hand. I would expect when going first to be significantly advantaged against most decks when I have Cinderella. And I'm going first and have a curve like this where you get to go 1 into 2 into 2 and 1 on turn 3. It is worth noting that in most situations where you don't have a Cinderella on turn 1, you're looking to play a 3-cost on turn 3 more often than playing a 2 and a 3. So the value of some of these cards does change when you don't have a Cinderella and you have songs, because you really want to be singing on turn 4 if you can, for tons of reasons. Just to make sure you can empty your hand quicker if you have a Doc, make sure you can sing potentially a strength on Lawrence itself. If you play turn 3 Lawrence and then you have Rapunzel, you can strength the Lawrence with its singing with the Lawrence itself, and then Rapunzel it for 3 cards. It's always important to keep cards in the hand if you can, but of course as soon as you find a Doc, empty your hand as quick as possible and play the Doc, because you don't want to get stranded with more than one Doc. Amethyst Steel, pretty much the same game plan. They don't have any disruptive elements. They may have Fire the Cannons. Fire the Cannons may be a reason, if you're knowing that that's the matchup, to lead on Daisy. But that's a matchup where I really don't like questing with Daisy very often, honestly. It's more of a card I use to close games out and just sits there. Because more often than not, they have a ton of characters, and giving them more cards to Foxes. Fox is probably one of the best cards against this deck, Mim Fox. So Daisy is actually not very good into the Amethyst Steel matchup. It does, however, dodge Fire the Cannons where Cinderella would get eaten. And since you're kind of forced into playing Daisy Duck at some point, it's uninkable, it may be better to lead on Daisy over Cinderella in this matchup with this hand even. I might see inking the Happy and the Cinderella in that situation to play Daisy Smee and then just have something to play on turn 3, or another Smee would work, or maybe cast a Strength, but you'd have the ability to play Daisy out and have some power for your Strength. But dodging Fire the Cannons is pretty great. One of the best ways that they can come back into the game is by Fire the Cannonsing up, meaning playing Fire the Cannons on a card that costs more than 1. Doing it on turn 1, going second is a huge blow, so I really, in that situation, may lead with the Daisy here. In the Amber Steel matchup, it's just imperative you lead on Cinderella. Lilo is not great in the Amber Steel mirror match, typically, especially if there are Calhouns running around. There's, of course, Amber Steel Songs and Amber Steel Dwarven Mine and mirror match. That kind of matchup can vary on what you want to lead with here, but pretty much you always, ink with here, but you always want to play Cinderella. Happy is going to be the ink for sure in that matchup. But Daisy's fine late in that matchup. I wouldn't want to quest with it early. You can hit Songs against the more song-heavy version, but also giving them a card like Rapunzel when you're tapping your Daisy Duck isn't great either, so I would avoid doing that if you can. Ruby Amethyst, if you know you're playing that matchup, I still would lead on Cinderella. They may skip their turn 1 play of a 1-drop card, if it's a Turnbox Followers or Broom. If it's a Diablo, they'll probably still play it out. But usually just the threat prevents them from playing a card like Flynn, where it can get out of hand if they have Flynn Sisu. They don't even want to play the Flynn into a Cinderella going second, so that's fine. They want to make something more stable so that it can survive a storm. And if you have a Strength, that's a great little bait and switch. And against, of course, Ruby Sapphire, we are going hard. We're going to be, since our Daisy Duck is going to be our leading play, and that's vulnerable to the small Sisu, we don't care about playing the Cinderella too much. We don't care about playing the Happy over the Cinderella, since both the Daisy and the Cinderella are vulnerable to small Sisu. Happy is usually a good way to play out a turn 1 play that's not vulnerable to those, but since we have the Daisy, we would want to just overload the Cinderella and get that in play, because we want to be able to sing to kill small Sisu if they have it, just to stop them from shifting onto it. That's one of the ways they can win when they're going second, is if they have Sail into Sail Sisu and then shift Sisu on turn 4. That's the scariest line. The finals of the Charlie's Collectible event, you can see my opponent had that actually both games when they were on the draw. They had that line of Sail into Sail Sisu, and I had the answer both times. I actually drew into it one time after immediately inking a Strength. Got a little lucky in that situation, but it worked out. But yeah, that's all the matchups here. Let's go to the next hand, new game. So first thing first, notice we have essentially our box checked. We have a 1-drop, we have options of 1-drops. And you'll notice last time I didn't mulligan the Happy even though I had a 1-drop. I don't mind keeping it because Happy is honestly not the best card in the deck. It's something I don't really care to play too much out. It's just a kind of throwaway card. Blind, this is actually a very interesting keep. I might actually keep all the cards in this hand. It has a lot of tools to both be aggressive when going first, and even going second it has some tools to kind of catch back up. But I think going second this hand's a lot worse. Lawrence is just the best 3-drop probably right now to play in the game almost, or in this deck at least. It's just a huge character, and that's not made too many ways to deal like short points of damage to it. Cinderella is the best 1-cost card to play and going second, unless you kind of get up ink back. Not just in this deck, but in any deck. Just the best thing to do on turn 1. Going first, I would be tempted to keep this whole hand. That does not mean that's what I'm doing going second. So going first, blind, I'd probably just keep. I would potentially throw a Lawrence back, just because I'm looking to find a song to pair with the Cinderella. And I already have one Lawrence. I don't want to ink a second one because it's a fine later game card. I don't know how good Lilo's going to be, and I don't know how good Seven Dwarfs Mine's going to be. They're all plans I can have and how plans I can kind of play out. I think the only thing I could potentially do blind going first is this, or not. Not means I'm going to be inking the Happy, playing the Cinderella in turn 1, and then going from there. My second draw step will heavily dictate how the rest of the game's going to go, so I can't really go through that. But let's go through some of the matchups there. And on the draw, let's do on the draw here. I'm still keeping the Cinderella. I'm still keeping a Lawrence at least. I don't want either of these really going second. I really need to find a 2-cost card. I think I'm keeping one Lawrence, not both. And I like the Rapunzel at playing catch-up. more often than not, when you're going second, you're going to be on the back foot and looking to challenge in some ways into things. Rapunzel is very good at making that kind of small advantage into a huge advantage when you get to go second and Rapunzel after challenging with Lawrence. So I think this is what I would do blind going second, this kind of setup here. I am looking for a two drop, and I'm keeping my happy as a potential turn 2 play if I don't find one. And I don't really want to play Lilo or Dwarven Mine. Going second, I'm really looking for a Smee or a Calhoun just to have on turn 2. I would even take a Daisy. This hand's really looking for, again, Smee, Calhoun, Storm, anything like that. Dock isn't the greatest from the situation. It'd probably make me want to ink my Rapunzel pretty quickly, but not the worst draw in the deck for sure. But let's go to more kind of texturized matchups there. We're going to go through each of them. Green, purple. Going first, I'm very tempted to do just what I said before. I think that Lilo struggles a bit in the matchup from being relevant. They have a lot of good answers to the mine. I think this is what I would do against green, purple. Going second. Going first, I can see the mine actually being somewhat relevant, and I would at that point want to just keep, instead of looking for a 2-drop, keep the Lilo strictly to be ink, because I don't want to have to ink something like a Rapunzel in the mid game. What this hand allows me to do is go Cindy on 1, turn 2 mine on the play, and then turn 3 happy, move to the mine to deal 2. That's usually good enough to help keep the board clear, and then at that point after that I can use Lawrence if that doesn't work out, or ink it. Rapunzel is pretty difficult to take advantage of in that matchup, but it can happen. And if I draw a way to self-damage my Lawrence, it's a really good play to shoot my own Lawrence and then Rapunzel it. So I want to have something to go. So I'd either just the Lawrence as well, or Lawrence and Lilo. If I'm keeping Lilo, it's just for ink. I'd have to play my odds on what I'm doing, because I'm keeping a hand with essentially 5 inkables, throwing back 2, meaning I have 53 cards I'm drawing from, and 16 are uninkable. One would be a Daisy, which is fine. Dock is catastrophically bad. Calhoun's fine. Storm is fine. So I'm more or less probably in the 85% range for cards to hit, which is fine if I throw those back. But as a safety net, I might just do it just to not have to take the risk. Green, steel. I'm probably doing that same thing, going first, because the hand is immune from Ursula, and it has the mine happy line to shoot the Diablo. And even if they have a Cove on turn 2, essentially I go Cinderella, turn 2 mine, they go Diablo, Cove. I can then use happy to they probably would Ursula me. I guess they would see my hand first, knowing I'll have one, but they might Cove the happy, but you can still then challenge the Diablo the turn after, depending on what they have. So they have to deal with Cinderella and happy with songs to kind of get out of it, and it's a little bit difficult. They have a difficult time dealing with mine without their own coves or anything like that. So I think I would do something similar. Again, Lilo probably just for ink. But yeah, that's what I do there. Same goes for this matchup. I think this is the only thing I would do. Again, Lilo going first or second is going to be the only contingency. I think going second I can afford to mulligan it. Going first I don't want to because of the ink considerations. Amber Steel, in a mirror match situation, I would be tempted to fully keep the hand, actually. Lawrence is one of the better cards. Getting to Rapunzel is huge in the matchup, and Seven Dwarfs Mine kind of makes it so that the onus is on them to actually start doing something. And while you don't have a Storm or anything like that, you can threaten it when going first, and if you don't have it and they play their own Cinderella, you can play your Seven Dwarfs Mine on turn 2, and then on turn 3, kind of get your Storm effect by playing Happy and moving it. So I think this hand's actually very fine in the mirror match going first or second. Going first is always better, of course, but going second it's fine too. If we're playing its Ruby Amethyst, I'm totally fine with this hand as well. I think I'd get rid of one of Lawrence's. Mine is not great either, but it's a card you could keep for ink. Same thing with Lilo. I don't mind having these cards here just to kind of play, a game where I'm guessing a little bit. Lawrence is very good against Sisu. It may be a reason to keep a second one, honestly, but depending on how many crabs people are running these days, Lawrence may get better or worse. Them just being able to put a small character into a Lawrence first and then kill it with the Fox is always disappointing. But usually having them bottlenecked and how many characters they haven't played is the best way to beat them. Dwarven Mine can help take down cards like Genie. When you have like a Happy in play, you can, if you already have a Happy in play, they have an Exerted Genie, you can play the mine, shoot it for 2, for 4, and then challenge the genie and take care of it. But I'm not looking to mulligan too much. I think in that matchup, Lilo is very important. I really don't want to ink Lilo against Ruby Amethyst. It's a card that really prevents them from ever be preparing you. And as long as you keep Sisus off the board, they can never Sisu you. Really, 8 is too much for that to really matter in their situation. They don't have enough time to play cards like Friends on the other side in that matchup, or in this matchup, I should say. I do think it's a pretty good matchup. So yeah. And against Ruby Sapphire, this hand is pretty fine, honestly. You have some cards to ink like Happy, but you have a turn 1 play, turn 2 play, turn 3 play, and you have Sisu to help deal with, or say you have Dwarven Mind to help deal with the Sisu, pinging it for 1 against the 1 cost Sisu where they're going to try and shift towards it. Rapunzel's not the greatest. I might get rid of that in this matchup just to find maybe a dock or have a better chance of it. If I had a Storm, I would consider keeping the Rapunzel here. Say this Dwarven Mind was a Storm, or the Lilo was a Storm, or even Happy, or any card was a Storm except for the Cinderella with a Lawrence in my hand still. I would consider keeping it so that I could sing Storm on itself and then heal with Rapunzel. Getting some card draw things going is really important to make sure you have a little bit of staying power post the first sweeper effect. But yeah, that's certainly one thing to consider with that. And yeah, that's pretty much all the matchups that are here. So let's just assume, as we were talking before, maybe throwing back Lilo or Lawrence. Let's just say both. We threw back both. And we have a really good 2-drop to play, and we have a good card to ink, depending on the matchup. This matchup's one where you can ink. Kita's pretty much going to be inked most of the time, but there will also be times where you have 5 ink and play and it just wins the game immediately, so totally why it's in the deck. Just getting that super high power card draw effect that just ends the game when you play it, so love it. Let's do another hand here. Alright. So, we talked about this from the beginning. One of the first rules, first box to check. Again, I'm doing these live. We're just kind of going with them on that. Do I have a 1-drop? The answer is no. There are very few cards to keep in your hand if you don't have a 1-drop. So, one of my favorite things to do, and I'll kind of talk about it in a minute here, is use what's called a Hypergeometric calculator. It lets you kind of tell you the odds on certain things. So, from this position, for us to full mulligan, we have 53 cards left in our deck, and we're looking at 7 cards, and we have roughly 11 or 12 hits, right? There are 11 1-drops in the deck, or I don't remember exactly. I think they're 12. Let's say 12. You have roughly at that point an 83% chance on a full mulligan from a 53 card deck with 12 outs to hit a 1-drop, and that's a really high percentage, but any card you keep essentially deducts about 7% from that equation. So if I'm going first, I think there's some leeway in missing. Having a 2-drop is fine. Meaning I may want to keep Lawrence. Lawrence is the best 3-drop to play in the deck. It's very strong. It lets you do a lot of things with some of your cards. Smee is the only other card I would consider keeping in situations like this going first. Smee, Lawrence, and Doc could be, but I think it's more often not going to be the best idea when you don't have a 1 to keep. I think that blind, my hand would be doing this. I really want to find a 1. I want to find a good 2. I have tons of them in my deck, and I think the odds of missing on those, when you factor in the amount of 2-drops I can hit that are really good, is super low. That's, I think, I'd be doing blind with this hand. Going second, I may be inclined to just do this to find a 1 or a 2. I think that's how drastic you have to be with the deck, and I think you get to be. There's not too many uninkables, and a lot of the uninkables, again, 8 of them are the Calhouns or Daisies, so they're fine to just play out. Essentially from this position, I have 8 uninkables I don't mind hitting, so I'm not too worried about my ink count, and I have 6 uninkables that I'm not thrilled about hitting, 3 docks and 3 storms. So I'm not feeling scared about mulliganing. I'm going to throw away the whole hand. Going second, really need to find our 1 or 2. I'm going to go ahead and briefly say I don't know that changes too much across the board here. I will say I'm much more inclined when going first or second to keep a Lawrence against Ruby Sapphire. Ruby Sapphire is a matchup I think that for sure I want Lawrence. It's one of the best cards in a lot of ways, just surviving all the removal, Sisu, things like that, that they can throw at you. They have to give away a Hiram hit for 4 if they want to, shrink it, usually is how it works out, or a Tipo hit, which can be relevant. The one, every lore matters, every character matters. And in this kind of deck here, getting across the finish line, you can't do it any other way other than questing, so you need stable bodies. And Lawrence is the most stable of them all. 4 strength is something I wish we had more of at a lower rate. A 3-cost 4/3 quest for 2 maybe, something like that would be reasonable. Dale is another consideration on the sheet of things to consider with the deck. Keep getting a little bit of light through my window, sorry about that. Yeah, that's kind of what I would keep in this hand when going first. Going second, I think you have to accept against Ruby Sapphire. And I don't really think this changes too much across the board. So let's just kind of plan for our odds and mulligan. And see, we have a reasonable hand. We have a 1, we have a 2, we have some strengths which are good or bad. I think, so let's just say blind, we have this hand. My first inclination is probably going to be to ink the strength. The reason being is that we only have 6 songs left in their deck, and if they play an emerald card, or if they ink an emerald card and play an amethyst 1-drop, a Diablo or something like that, I really want to get the songs out of my hand so I don't get hit by Ursula. This deck can be very constrained on cards if it doesn't have any card draw, which this hand doesn't have a Rapunzel, it doesn't have a dock to get going. So we're going to be really confined with how many cards we have. The only other option would be to not ink either strength, meaning you're inking the Pluto and the Piglet and hoping to draw into something. But if you think about how the games play out against that deck, you're really not able to quest or make use of these two too early, honestly, to where they're not going to be able to just pick up the Ursula and replay it with the Snake on turn 4. They don't have many things you want to turn sideways unless you can clear everything. They're going to be able to get your Cinderella with Fox, and I really don't want that to happen. So against Emerald decks, I'm much inclined to ink strengths immediately, and blind even, I'm willing to ink a strength first so that if they play an Emerald card or I see one, I can ink my second strength immediately, being it's much less likely to hit, even though I have the Cinderella. I think it's just too devastating of a hit to lose one of these against an Emerald deck, especially when going first. Going second here, similar rules apply. I think that Pluto is a fine card. I doubt we're playing Piglet going second in this game, so I might ink that on turn 1. My turn 1 ink is going to be one of these two going second. Since we're not able to get both strengths out of our hand before they could play an Ursula potentially, I'm not going to ink one on turn 1, just an off chance that they're not playing that color and we can just use both of these pretty effectively. It is a really, really good card into a lot of the Ruby Amethyst decks. Being able to take out Sisus and Genies on consecutive turns is incredible. Any game where you're able to essentially on turn 3 sing strength, I guess you can't quite sing strength on turn 3 and do that. Any situation when you're able to take out some of their characters early is great. Anything you take out a Genie and then on subsequent turns the Sisu, where you are able to go turn 3 Lawrence, turn 4 they play Genie, you play character and strength. Where you can do that, really hard for them to come back from without it be prepared. And yeah, Pluto's fine. I think going second, we're very unlikely to play this Piglet, so this will be my first ink going second. While going first, it would be a strength. Very different plans. And of course, it could change entirely based off of what they play, what our second ink is going to be, so I can't really discuss that. We may play Calhoun going second if they're not Ruby Sapphire. With Ruby Sapphire, probably playing a Piglet on turn 2. So when going first, I'm inking a strength. When going second, it's likely to be a toss-up, depending on what we draw and also what they're playing. But it's more likely I'm inking a Piglet against an Emerald deck than it is the strength there, because I can't get rid of both before I can Ursa. So, yeah. Let's go to another hand here. All right, blind. I really don't enjoy keeping strengths. I think blind I would just not keep either of them, especially with this type of hand. I do really like the hand, though. This hand is quite good. Going first blind, I'm probably not keeping the Calhoun, and this hand is just kind of chef's kiss against a Ruby Sapphire deck, where you get to be on the play. You have Daisy and a Piglet Smee or Smee Piglet. I think I'm more inclined, more often than not, to lead on Smee, depending on what my first couple draw steps would be against Ruby Sapphire than Piglet. Sometimes Piglet's better, but it can getting brawled is fine. But since we have a Daisy duck, I think playing Piglet's fine since they're both brawlable. And yeah. Sometimes you want to play Smee first against a not deck where you're trying to race as fast as you can so that the surprise factor of it not taking a damage if it's sideways is brought up. There's only 3 Piglets in the deck, and it's the only card that can stop that from getting a damage. But it does come up, and I have myself forgotten it. It does happen. So don't feel too bad if it happens to you. But getting a Smee down first can be more important against Ruby Sapphire, depending on how the first parts of the game happen. Since we have this Rapunzel, we don't have a way to sing. We need to have a 3-drop to sing any kind of storm on our own character to then draw with Rapunzel. So even in the world we're playing as Ruby Sapphire, it may depend on what our replacement cards are and what our first couple draw steps are, whether it tried to lead on Smee or Piglet, because playing a Rapunzel and getting any value out of it, basically any of your cards turning into a cantrip effect or an extra card, is going to be really crucial in that matchup, just to keep up a little bit beyond their removal, what they can do and cross the finish line before they can take over. So I think blind going first, I'm doing this. Blind going second, I might be somewhat tempted to keep the Calhoun, but I don't think so, just based on the fact that we have a mandatory turn 1 play, really. I think this is what I would do blind, no matter what. Against Emerald Amethyst, I think it's a matchup where Daisy is really just a control card. Again, don't mind having it. Again, I don't like keeping Daisy going second very often, but it still is passing the box being checked of, do I have a 1-drop? And I need to make sure I have a 1-drop. So even though I don't really like it, it's likely to be a card I use to try and trade, or maybe bait them into then trying to challenge into it, to then Rapunzel with something else. It's a card I have to keep. You have to have a 1. Same would probably go for green steel. You can say a similar thing about this hand against green steel when you're going second. Daisy is not very good, but they do have actually, I think, the most, aside from Ruby Sapphire, most misses for Daisy in their entire deck. They have so many songs and so many locations that this is, I think, they have 25 misses for this to hit, so that's pretty nice. I think in that situation, I'd be keeping this as ink against green steel, still going Daisy into Smee. Going second, it would depend on what they played to begin with, if I was going to use this or not. Smee is just a fine card to play. Helps deal with locations and helps those self-damages for Rapunzel. It's a lightning rod for some removal, and Daisy can be pretty good as well. You should get to be able to bump things. Calhoun's pretty good against them too. There's an argument to keep something like this and just play the Calhoun, but I really don't like inking the Smee. And if I'm playing 4 Calhouns, I don't want to keep it often, but if I'm playing 3, I might. Again, I'm going second against green steel. It is hard for them to deal with. They can't storm it twice, or they have to storm it twice with 1 card. So I might do this going second against green steel. Going first, I don't really want it. Amethyst steel, probably the same deal with the hand. Again, I'm never really keeping strengths without Cindy. Even with Cindy, I don't like keeping strengths. Really, just Storm is the only card I'll sometimes keep with Cindy, or if I have a 3-cost and a Rapunzel. If I have like Pete or Lawrence and Rapunzel, I might keep Storm. And those 2 cards to then sing with Pete on itself, to shoot it with Storm and then draw with Rapunzel, or to whatever else happens there. But I think I would do this against Amethyst Steel, just a 2-drop that they can't fire the cannons. I don't really want to play Piglet out, so this is going to get fire the cannons if I turn it sideways at all. And Calhoun's pretty good at challenging their Maleficents, other things like that. It doesn't touch Genie, unfortunately, but it does survive cards like Elsa if it has no damage on it, so that's nice to have. Also Quest into Fox. Challenges foxes. It's a good card. But yeah, keeping Daisy because I have to, really, is what this is on the draw. And the Amber Steel matchup, I think, might be one of the only matchups I want to potentially have a strength still. Daisy is not good, but again, going second, it's going to be a card I have to keep. And going first, I'm just going to have it as well to be a control card, and it works with the Rapunzel pretty well. I think I might keep the strength in that matchup and not keep the Calhoun. This may be ink, but I may need to really play a 2-drop like a Mr. Smee that I can kind of get out under a Cinderella, and really Calhoun does the same thing as Smee there, but I think I'd rather have the option to be able to ink the card if I draw something better. Not that there are many better 2-drops than Smee, it's kind of the best 2-drop in the game, but just having more inkable cards is more important, and they can't really deal with your strength. So against Amber Steel, Songs, or Dwarven Mine, I want to keep the strength here. Not playing the Piglet out typically. It's just the best storm target in the deck. Anything that costs more than 1 and gets stormed is not going to be ideal. And Rapunzel is one of the best cards, so you kind of have to keep it and play the Rapunzel game. But we're really looking for in this hand a singer of some kind. Any of the 12 we have, whether it be Lawrence, Pete, or Cinderella, to play on 3, or to have him play on 3 to then sing the strength on Daisy or one of the 3-drops, and then Rapunzel for 3 cards to try and get ahead. Ideally, in that situation, you want to strength the weakest strength character so they can't then challenge in and then Rapunzel for a bunch of value when you do that sequence. But yeah, let's hit the mulligan button, because I think that the other ones are pretty easy. They were very much the same, these matchups there. I don't want to keep either strength, and the Calhoun's going to go away in these matchups as well. So yeah, these hands here. Let's go to another one. Another hand here we're going to go through. Okay. I'm not going to do this one. I'm going to skip it here, mainly because I'm not going to talk about it too much. This is very much I don't have a 1-drop hand. And again, I think going first, it's reasonable to keep a Lawrence. Going second, I would not. So let's just assume we're going first blind, and we hit. Cool. That's basically the rule you need to follow. Not really much else to say about this kind of hands. Let's do a hand where we have actual decisions to make. So this hand has actual decisions to make. This hand's a very cool hand. I actually really like looking at this hand. It's a very good hand. So why is this a very good hand? Well, we have a game plan. We have a couple uninkables, which are usually not the best, but we also have something we need to understand as far as how we craft hands. So in my opinion, this is a full keep. I'm not mulliganing this hand at all. Going blind, really. And really any matchup I can think. When I'm going first, this is just a keep. I don't think it matters the matchup kind of thing. So the only decision we have for this hand really is if we play the Cinderella on turn 1 or the Daisy on turn 1. pretty heavily of the opinion that you need to play the Cinderella on turn 1, unfortunately. And it's really solely because of the Amber Steel mirror match. You need to have... I don't think so. I'm lying. I think the Daisy Duck is... No, you still have to play the Cinderella. So I'm debating here because there's a lot of situations you can go through permutations of what they can lead with. I think Cinderella is the best one because it is also something you can quest with on turn 1 and not feel bad in the mirror match. So let's just say against Amber Steel, we're playing against the mirror match here. What we would do is going to ink this Happy or this Pluto, probably the Pluto, play Cindy. They play their own Cindy. We would then ink, let's just say we drew a blank card, another Happy. We'll ink a Happy, play 2 daisies, and then strength the Cindy. Then we draw something that costs 1 or 2, either ink it or play it, and then also play out the dock. Our hand is empty. We get to draw 2 with dock. We have a giant board. We have 5 characters in play on turn 3. It's an insane hand. Very good proactive hand. Inking the Pluto because it's never going to happen. And the Happy is likely to be ink as well, but we maybe want to play on turn 3 a Happy and something else, or a 2-drop if we draw one. So we're doing 2 draw steps before we want to dock, going first here. And we want to play this on turn 1 so that we can, if they don't do anything relevant, quest. If they play a Chernobog Solars, we can strength it, or if we draw a Storm, we can strength. Really, it's the Storm draw that makes us have to play the Cinderella on turn 1, because in the world where we're playing against an Amber Steel mirror match, we have to be able to storm their Cinderella with our Cinderella. And if we are playing the Amber Steel mirror match and they had to bleed on Daisy Duck instead of Cinderella, we can then just quest freely and not give them a potential extra card, because we really want to gauge how we want to use the daisies in the mirror match. They're not always the best thing to just turn things sideways with. You can get into trouble that way a little bit, digging your opponent to peat and things like that, but you're still probably going to quest when you're going first and have a hand like this. But still, just to note, it's not always a black and white type thing. It just, everything does depend, but I want to plan for the best. The exception, of course, to everything I just said is this matchup here. While I still think that I'm full keeping in this matchup, I think my sequencing is going to be, of course, leading on Daisy Duck in that situation, into Daisy Cindy. While Cindy isn't the greatest, you're already insulated against the small Sisu because they're going to want to kill a Daisy Duck, and we want to just empty your hand quickly. It's unlikely we can sing with the strength against Ruby Sapphire, but maybe killing a Tipo when we're about to empty our hand, or maybe just inking the strength and playing whatever 2-drop we play is going to happen. It all depends. But yeah, I think that's the only matchup where our turn 1 play is going to differ going first. And going second against a Cinderella hand, let's do that really quick, because that's one matchup that does happen, and a common question I get asked about how to mulligan when they let on Cinderella. Well, here's the first issue with us figuring that out, is that it does really depend on what our next card is. So I'm going to just say we have the Pluto in our hand, and just for argument's sake, we have the Pluto and Happy, and our first 2 draw steps are going to be this, then this. What do I mulligan into? Pete, then Smee. Okay, so we have Pete, Smee. All right, so we drew Smee for our Pete for our first action, so the Pluto's still going to go down. I'd probably lead on the Daisy Duck, because if they storm it, that's fine, if they let on Cinderella. Then on turn 2, we can again go into Daisy, Cindy, and then if they could then kill the Cinderella with a Storm, that's fine. We can then challenge into whatever they're doing. If they played a Smee or another 3-power character, then they would kind of leave themselves a little bit vulnerable to Rapunzel. We also have the Happy to ink, or just play the Pluto at some point either as well. Pluto's pretty good in the mirror match in that sense, where it's a card that you often play upright more than defending. I will say, I think Pluto's underrated as just a 5/5 upright than a bodyguard. It's basically given a bodyguard against Ruby decks, against decks that are trying to Maui you. That's where you really want to bodyguard it. But as a 5/5 that they don't have agency to immediately challenge into, and you get to challenge with first, it's really powerful. So I would get a little bit away from thinking that Pluto has to be exerted when you play it. I think you really should think about it as a card you can play upright to have even more devastating effect in a lot of matchups. But yeah, this hand was very good. An example of a full keep. Again, the Pluto and the Happy weren't necessarily cards we really wanted, but the Happy was flexible enough, and the Pluto was probably going to be ink. Some situations it may change, but yeah, great hand. Let's do another one here. Okay, so this is a more middling hand. This one, again, the strengths are kind of awkward. I don't mind sometimes keeping one of them. Let's just say blind, okay? Blind, I think my mulligan would probably be something like this. Strength isn't ideal, but I'm pretty sure my turn 1 play is going to be ink Cindy, play Cindy. That's what I'm going to do turn 1. I have the ability to then kill Cinderella on turn 2 if they play that, getting a Smee out, and also whatever my next card is going to be, and then potentially using Smee and Rapunzel to draw some cards. That's what my hand is looking like, blind. No real questions about that needed to figure out how it's going to work out. Going second, I don't think it changes too much. I think this hand's still fine going second. whether or not I play against a deck where Cinderella is going to be good on turn 1 or not, or something else really gets outweighed by Smee. In matchups where Cinderella is not really good, Smee is quite good. So we still have the 1-drop box checked. We have the Rapunzel plus Strength to kind of potentially draw some cards, whether we draw a Lawrence or a Daisy Duck to then use Strength on to then Rapunzel is up in the air. Lilo's a fine card. It can be ink. I wouldn't be too afraid of inking these except against specifically Ruby Amethyst, more so than Ruby Sapphire. Ruby Amethyst is the Be Prepared deck. Ruby Sapphire is more the Sisu deck, and this card is significantly better against Be Prepared than Sisu. So I think that in order to help make the Ruby Amethyst matchup even better, you really can't afford to ink Lilos, except you really want 2 if you can. So inking 1 unless you have the other 2 is kind of sketchy. Not saying I'd play Lilo out instead of playing Smee. I wouldn't go like Lilo here instead of Smee. I'd probably still play Smee out against there, but I'd try and avoid inking it if I can, as best I can, because it is more insulation in that matchup. It is just sometimes they have to kill it. You know, they have to. I had people Medusa my Lilo because they just had to, and I brought it back, and then their Medusa couldn't sing a Friends, really limiting their ability to play Friends on the other side and take some turns off to just play cards like Genie are really what you're trying to do. And Lilo does a pretty good job of that since it's a constant threat. They need to have something in play for. So using some of your removal spells to kind of parry their characters to make Lilo even better, one of the best ways to beat Ruby Amethyst. Going second, yeah, I don't think much changes. I think I'd probably keep this, and I think that, in all honesty, my Lilo in my head here is going to be most likely ink by keeping it. And again, that's fine. I just really don't want to draw an uninkable, is what I'm doing by keeping it here. My Cinderella is going to be ink for my other Cinderella. Smee is going to do something, and depending on what I draw, we'll get to. Smee might be ink if I draw like a Calhoun back-to-back, but we'll see. You know, Doc Calhoun draw steps. If I mulligan this, then those are my first 2 draws. It's not great, so I might play the Calhoun instead of the Smee out, but Doc's going to make me want to not Rapunzel and more just empty my hand, so it could change the whole texture of the game. Hard to know. Green Steel, I think that this is about what I can do. Going second, I can kind of weigh whether or not I think that they're going to be able to Ursula me. If they don't play a 1-drop, I imagine there's going to be an Ursula, so I'd ink the Strength, but I would still, in that situation, mulligan just the Strength and then play the Cinderella and off a Strength if they do nothing on turn 1, just because I want to bait them into using the Ursula, and it's a really poor play for them on turn 2. If they play like a Morph, if they play like a Cove, or sometimes a Mine even. Some of the newer versions have Mines, the one that Zan's posted. All those things are pretty important there, so I think that this hand is still fine in that matchup there. Amethyst Steel, I like basically doing this. Lilo is going to be ink in that matchup, Amethyst Steel. It's not really something I care too much about. So going first or second, I don't mind keeping it because it's just going to be ink. Amber Steel, similar thing. I think this is very similar to a previous hand we looked at with Amber Steel, where I'm just trying to establish Cinderella. And in cases where they lead on Cindy, I may just try and not play Cindy on 1, play Smee on turn 2, so that when I play Cindy on turn 3, I can then challenge in and then do something about that. So it would be entirely contextual there, but Lilo would probably be ink. I don't want to keep the Strength for ink because it's just so much better card to draw later. That's why it's the mulligan versus the Lilo in a lot of cases. And here, I'm much less inclined to actually keep the Strengths, either of them against this deck, because I really want them in the late game, or mid to late game. More mid game, not late game, because mid game implies, or late game implies to be prepared to happen usually. So I would probably do this. With the thoughts of inking Cinderella, play Cinderella, and depending on what the other 2 cards are, the rest of my game plan is going to fold out. I think I have enough to always keep a Rapunzel. I always want to keep a Rapunzel or a Doc if I can, and formulate a game plan around it, just because you need something to keep going beyond turn 4. Both of them are about turn 4 plays. I don't like keeping Rapunzel when I have a Doc. I'd much rather keep a Doc hand than a Rapunzel hand because it's much easier to play around with, and Rapunzel's a much better draw later in the game, usually. And against this matchup here, it doesn't really change. Rapunzel might not even be very good there. I think against this matchup, I'd want to just do this and try to be aggressive. Cindy is still a 1-drop card to play. Smee on turn 2, Lilo on turn 3. There's a chance I want the Rapunzel, but it's hard to make it really work out. I might want it if I'm going first here. I'd probably keep it to help the Smee, but yeah, I think going first I would keep it, going second I would not, just because Smee is likely to get a damage or 2 on it before anything else. But yeah, let's do essentially that mulligan. Let's say we're going first against Ruby Sapphire, and we have, great, turn 1 ink play, because I'm probably not playing this ever, and I think this is a chance I play the second Cinderella on turn 3. I go Cindy into Piglet into Smee, Cindy, or potentially, depending on what my first couple draws are, Smee, Quest, then like Lilo, and then Piglet, so this has a damage on it for my Rapunzel turn. really good to time those and make sure that you may or may not want to damage on it or not with how you use that. But I do like having Piglet out more so than I like having Smee.
Hi, buddy.
Sorry, my cat's joined the fray. And the other one's under my foot now. Whoops. But yes, Kita is pretty much unplayable against blue-red. You never really want to play it if they ever have access to CCU. Because even if they don't have access to CCU, it means they can then brawl anything in play, which is fine. I don't mind that too much, but it can be a little bit awkward. Just never play this card when they can big CCU. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. Maui, I don't care as much about. If they Maui one of your characters and you shrunk your character and they didn't take damage with their Maui, that's fine. But yeah, don't ever get CC'd. Just a rule. You know, you can play Kita if it's your only card in play off the top. You know, they've wrathed you and they have some things in play or one card in hand or something and you just play Kita because you drew it. That's fine. Don't just ink the Kita, but you get it. All right, let's do one more here. And we're going to start with, let's just say, we're going to mulligan it first as though we're playing against this matchup here. As though we know. If we're smart, we know, right? Okay. This is a good one for this matchup. This is a very interesting one for this matchup because we don't have that first box checked of one drop, right? But we do have two really good cards when we're going first. Piglet might actually be too slow sometimes going second. I actually really like playing Smee over Piglet going second, especially if they haven't ramped, just to dodge a brawl. And it does sometimes depend on if they have Ice Block or not. I really don't want to play a Piglet because I don't want them to play small CSU on turn 3. I'd rather them take away essentially their turn. Even though I could play either of these on turn 3, if they have an Ice Block, I don't want to let them play small CSU on 3. I'd rather them play Brawl on turn 3 on the Smee just because I want them to have to use their turn 4 and not play a card like Hiram or Alfaro Go when I play my Piglet to answer it. So it's really really important that you time your cards correctly. But again, the big issue here is I don't have a 1-cost card. What do I do? Knowing the matchup, I think it's fine to keep the important cards. I can't afford to keep the second Piglet because I do think that not having a 1-drop here is going to make the first Piglet not even very good. I'm not going to be able to turn it on turn 3. You really have to have this online on turn 3 every single time if you're going to play it on turn 2. And it may vary if that works. I think that this matchup here it's that important to make sure that we have that kind of worked out. So on the play, I would probably do this. On the draw, I don't see it changing. Piglet is a lot worse on the draw, I believe, but it's still fine. I don't really mind about keeping Lilos or getting rid of them. I don't think that it's that important whether you keep them or get rid of them. Lilo's a fine card. But the only other argument I can make, and if, let's just say this Lilo was a Daisy, I would actually keep the Mine as well, because I want to actually have the Mine as a turn 4 play to counter their 1-cost Sisu, if that's how the game plays out. So if this was a Daisy, I would probably keep these and get rid of the second Piglet still. That's kind of hard, isn't it? I may not. I may do this. If this was Daisy, I'd probably do this. But at that point, would probably keep something else to be Ink so I don't have to disrupt my curve. So the whole game changes. As you can see, if this was a Lilo, I'd probably actually just keep this. So I have an Ink, potentially. Not too much variance in drawing into storms. If this is actually a Lilo, I'd probably keep the whole hand. Starting over. If this is a Lilo, my whole hand doesn't keep against blue-red. Because I'm keeping cards for Ink, I don't want to get tripped up with uninkables. I don't really need Dock too much. I wouldn't mind having a Dock, but I'm not trying to disrupt my game plan. I'm just ending the game. So going first, if this was a Lilo, or a Daisy Duck, I would probably keep the full hand. Going second, or not having this be a Daisy Duck, I think you have to get rid of all these. Not going second. If this wasn't a thing, I think you have to get rid of all these in search. So, awkward. Very awkward. Unfortunate, though. At that point, for those keeping track of the Hypergeometric calculator, from where we were at, we were 73% to draw 1-drop from that position. But from the opening hand, essentially before anything else happens, when you look at 12 cards, you're roughly like 97%. But once you have the actual numbers in front of you, it changes. So get around that. But yeah, this was a hand that definitely got a lot worse. Kita's obviously our Ink. We're probably playing Smee into Lawrence into Calhoun Piglet if we can help it. Storming something along the way, I guess, but not the greatest hand. I would be hard-pressed to see this winning going second against Ruby Sapphire, unless their hand was a little bit clunky. Going first, there's still definitely a chance. It's not completely game-breaking without a 1-drop. It is so much harder, and it really makes it so they have to have a poor hand. So, yeah, I would lead on Kita Ink, and then whatever, depending on what we draw, the Smee into Lawrence into then 2-4. You have to plan for that. Even though I could on turn 3 play the Piglet, and it's more lore, I need to play the Lawrence so that I can both use my curve effectively by playing 2/2s on turn 4, but also potentially sing the Storm if I'm running out of inkable cards, giving up 2 lore even. If you think about that, I'm down 2 lore, I'm down 3 lore, I'm down 5 total lore for doing that and just missing my 1 and having this awkward card there. A lot of things can go wrong, but we're not living in that world right now. So the other deck will do one more targeted kind of mulligan for here. All right, this is an interesting one. It's not the greatest. So we're playing against Ruby Amethyst. What do we do with this hand? Well, we have a game plan, right? We have somewhat of a game plan. Empty your hand with Dock. Once you have a card like Dock in your hand and you have a 1-drop, you can then formulate an entire game plan. What do you want to do? I don't want to keep this many songs, for sure. I don't mind keeping some of these things because they're cards to play out. Lilo is fine against Ruby Amethyst. It's not amazing, and having 1's just fine. The Mine is also potentially fine, too. They don't have too many great ways to answer it. It is foxable, but it's also just inkable, too. And I don't want to mulligan too hard once I have a Dock. This hand's a little awkward because I don't like keeping strengths, but I don't want to mulligan too much with Dock, because the more you mulligan with Dock in your hand to begin with, the more likely you are to draw a second Dock, and that's just bad. So I think going first, this would be my game plan here. Going second, I don't think the Mine's going to be valuable at all, so I'd probably do something like this. And even though I am adding more cards to my hand to potentially be no Dock, I do really want to keep the Dock because I think it's one of the best things to do to formulate your game plan around, just empty your hand and do Dock things if you can. So I think my play versus draw thing would be if I include the Mine. Going first, I think I can get the Mine out where it's reasonable. Going second, I don't think so. So yeah, this is where I would kind of be on this ladder here. And again, it could vary very much based off what we draw. Sure. Cindy Storm is fine. In this situation, I'd probably be inking the Dwarven Mine here. Namely because I think I had to play a character on turn 2, and I might make use of both of these songs at some point, depending on what happens after the turn 1 Cindy. They may or may not have a character for me to shoot, and if they don't, or whatever, how it works out, my turn 3 Pete will stop a Brawl from coming down on the Cinderella, so that I can use Pete and Cindy to sing both these songs, and then potentially empty my hand with Dock on turn 4. So it really all depends on how the first couple turns go, but this is a pretty good hand against Ruby Sapphire. It's not amazing, it's not terrible. I don't really like Lilo that much because it's so many times it just digs them to more foxes, which is the worst card for us to see, but this hand's fine. Deck is great. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of these decks. I think those are the 2 most important matchups. I'm going to go through more of kind of what to expect and what to see at this event. But this has kind of been a deep dive into mulligans with this deck. You really need to hit certain highlights. Again, some of the key cards are Dock and Rapunzel and how you formulate your game plans around them in the early turns and checking the box of 1-drops or not. I haven't gone too far into making changes to this deck yet. I've considered a lot of cards. I had about a sheet of like 17 cards I was considering. But I don't really know what to make of it quite yet. I'm really going to spend the rest of this week and some of the next few days really, and even the flight over there and watching the LCQs to really formulate the exact deck list I'm going to play. I will say I think that I think I'm probably going to remove a Calhoun, and I don't think the Plutos are really where I want to be. They've been a little bit clunky at times. I really don't know what to include though. I do really want another 1-drop card, but I don't want a 4th Happy. So I'm looking at some other 1-cost card. I've seen people use the Resist Mickey. I really don't like that card. It's not very good. It's just a 1-cost card that can kind of quest and not die to things. There are some potentials for inclusions of cards like the Queen Shift line even. It makes mirror matches kind of really difficult. It shifts for cheap enough of an effect that you can empty your hand quick enough with Dock, so it's not too bad there. It's a fine turn 5 play against some decks, and it really makes combat really annoying for a lot of different people. In conjunction with Happy, the Queen can help take down a Maui Shark, which is a problem for this deck at times if it can't be killed with the strength. So Queen Shift line is a consideration. There's so many cards to consider. I think I have like 16, 17, like a list of things I'm looking through to maybe include. I don't really like cards like Benja or things like that to answer Ice Block, even though Ice Block can be a pain in the butt, making your Smees and your Peets and stuff like that die to Sisu. But I think that just fighting the wrong axis that you're trying to fight with this deck on to really warrant inclusion. But yeah, that's what I got for today. We're going to do more tomorrow when we go through more decks and kind of how to prepare for them, play around them in certain situations we'll get into. But thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. Again, more mulligans, and we're going to get into the potentials and other things to include tomorrow working with this deck. I'm fairly certain I'm going to play some variation of this at the event. There's like a small chance I audible to some blue-red nonsense to surprise people, but I don't think so. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys all next time.